Well, that's an interesting loading screen. Kinda makes me feel a little bit scared. Trivia? There's nothing there yet. Tally-ho, internet! My name is Viexi, and welcome to Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. Apparently interactive experience about madness? Here we go, it's going to explain it for me. Dagon is a faithful interactive adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's work, focused on story and atmosphere. You will not find difficult choices, action sequences, or inventory management here, and movement is limited to progressing through locations along with the plot. So all in all, it should be, you know, just A to B.
I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more.
I shall be no more.
Penniless, and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below.
Don't do that. Don't. Hang on a second.
Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate.
I didn't say you were.
When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death.
There's a very, very big divide between those two afflictions. Let's pray for the first, at the very least. What is this? Morphine. Here is your video game issued explanation on morphine, internet. Morphine entered into use in the 19th century and was routinely administered to treat severe pain during the American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, and World War I, 1914 to 1918. It was also sold without restrictions until 1914. Morphine became more popular after the invention of the hypodermic syringe around 1854. Frederick Serturner, who first isolated the substance, originally named it morphium, after Morpheus, the Greek god associated with dreams. At the time when Dagon was published, morphine abuse, known as soldier's disease, already posed a big problem in the United States. This is really kind of going full on. I'm about to learn everything about this guy. I wonder if it's going to go into the fact that he was also a huge racist. We will see.
It was in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider.
Supercargo? Okay. So there's no moving around. I can't, like... Dagon was written around a month after the United States entered World War I. Lovecraft was actively interested in its course. He composed many poems in which he gave encouragement to soldiers and commented on the events unfolding in Europe. He tried to enlist in the army, which he mentions in one of the letters to Reinhard Kleiner. Some time ago, impressed by my entire uselessness in the world, I resolved to attempt enlistment despite my almost invalid condition. I argued that if I chose a regiment soon to depart for France, my sheer nervous force, which is not inconsiderable, might sustain me till a bullet or piece of shrapnel could more conclusively and effectively dispose of me. Letters to Reinhard Kleiner, H.P. Lovecraft. But even though he passed the physical exam, his mother prevented him from going to the war. She has threatened to go to any lengths, legal or otherwise, if I do not reveal all the ills which unfit me for the army. I am Providence. The Life and Times of H.P. Lovecraft. S.T. Joshi.
The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation.
Oh.
So that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we of her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors, that 5 days after we were taken, I managed to escape alone, in a small boat, with water and provisions for a good length of time.
It's called survivalism, my guy. We have provisions.
When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings.
there's really not much going on, to be honest.
Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator.
Man, it's always impressed me. People who can read the sky, the idea of that has always astounded me. Coming from just outside of London, where you can't see the sky at all, it's very interesting. It's very interesting that people would be able to look up at the sky and think, yep, south of the equator. Crazy.
Of the longitude, I knew nothing, and no island or coastline was in sight.
Not a single bloody one. Nothing. All there was the moon. Beautiful looking game though.
The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land.
I just want to point out that shadow. That is a very, very impressive shadow of the lamp there. Just felt like it had to be said.
But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue.
I wonder what it would be like to be just adrift. You have like that concept of water everywhere and not a drop to drink, you know, because you shouldn't be drinking seawater, which apparently isn't quite as dangerous as we thought it was. Don't quote me on that, that apparently you can drink it. At least a little bit. In a survival situation. But just the idea that, like, no one knows where you are, there's no way of finding your way back, there's no way of getting to wherever you are, even if you do know approximately where on the planet you are. The sense of isolation, it just makes me wonder how people would deal with that.
The change happened whilst I slept.
The change?
Its details I shall never know. For my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous.
Whoa! Oh! Oh! Huh. Now, has he gone mad because he's been isolated for so long? Lovecraft really liked, like, tentacles and stuff, didn't he? My man was into some mad hentai.
When at last I awoke, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see.
Oh, monotonous undulations. The man had a penchant for words. The man could write.
And in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished.
I think that you might have that the wrong way round, to be honest. I think most people would see this and they would be like, what the fuck is going on? I am disgusted by what I'm seeing. Holy fuck, get me the fuck away from here. And then maybe start, kind of wondering, wait, what actually happened after the fact? Survivalism is a hell of a drug.
For there was in the air, and in the rotting soil, a sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, and of other, less describable things which I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain.
I've actually just realised that squid wasn't as big as I thought it was. He was just sitting down. It's a really... That was just a really strange kind of change of perspective there. Just an observation. This kind of reminds me a little bit of Death Stranding, or like the original... I don't know... because a lot of that didn't really kind of make it into the final game, if I remember correctly, but like the initial trailers with like all of the dead whales and the fish and stuff. Interesting parallel. Makes me wonder if there was maybe some kind of Lovecraftian influence on that.
Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing, and nothing in sight, save a vast reach of black slime. Yet the very completeness of the stillness and the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear.
Man, this is full on.
The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet.
You are kind of screwed. At least that's what I would surmise. The origins of Dagon. To be honest, actually, I wouldn't mind reading this. Dagon seems to be inspired by Fishhead, a short novel by Irvin S. Cobb about unnatural affinities between a hybrid idiot and the strange fish of an isolated lake. Supernatural horror in literature, H.P. Lovecraft. And Lovecraft's dream about a strange island emerging from the ocean and him crawling in the ooze that covered its surface. Was he okay? Was he okay? Everyone keeps saying like, who's Lovecraft? No one says that. But nobody says, how is Lovecraft? Just ignore me. I'm trying to be funny when I'm not. I dreamed that whole hideous crawl, and can yet feel the ooze sucking me down. In defense of Dagon. H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft's interest in the topic stemmed from his aversion to fish and sea smells. In his own words, I have hated fish and feared the sea and everything connected with it since I was 2 years old. But I cannot recall what earlier experience gave me such a profound and lasting aversion to the sea and seafood. The Dweller in Darkness, Lovecraft. 1927, Donald Wandre. I mean, the ocean is very alien. You know, it's like all of these especially deep sea creatures are about as close to aliens as we have ever seen. At least up to this point. I fully believe aliens exist. We will eventually make contact. But for now, they're in our oceans. There's no need for that.
As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position.
The Morphine!
Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions for which innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths.
I mean, to be honest, in a situation like this, your brain would probably try to jump to whatever conclusion it could make sense. Does it sound sane? I guess it depends on the context. Me sitting here in my bedroom, not having this happen to me? Yes, it sounds completely insane. Him experiencing this firsthand? Trying to figure out what happened? But like, you didn't even wake up. You didn't even wake up until it had already happened, my guy. I think you're a bit crazy.
So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me, that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, straining my ears as I might.
I just want to point out, again, you did not wake up at any point while this was happening. I think you're crazy.
Nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dead things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens.
Uh-oh. Oh, the smell must be awful. Especially as the direct sunlight starts hitting everything.
As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for travelling purposes in a short time.
Really? I can't imagine ground like this would dry quickly at all. Could not imagine it.
That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue.
Can't imagine that's gonna happen, my guy. Sure would be nice if I could actually, you know, walk around. I do feel like, so it's, you know, the point and click aspect of it, very cool. I would like to see this fleshed out a little bit more.
On the third morning, I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odour of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal.
The narrator? Not the narrator, but the, you know, the person in the story have to admire their gumption. You know, giving it a good go. A lot of people would experience this and just collapse and die. But he's giving it a good 1-2. He's doing what he can and treading over giant squids as he does it.
All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert.
These things look like stuff out of Half-Life. I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, Toso. See, the only Dagon that I know is Mehrunes Dagon. That's a whale. That's pretty normal. They kind of remind me of like giant spider crab legs. That's enough to put me off of wanting to survive a situation like this. If anything makes me jump, I'm gonna cry.
That night, I encamped, and on the following day still travelled toward the hummock, though that object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first espied it.
What's this? The horrors of the ocean. Okay, I'm gonna read this one. The creator of the... Apparently, Cthulhu is supposed to be pronounced like Kulu. There's a whole thing. Lovecraft was like, no human would actually properly be able to pronounce that name because humans lack the vocal propensity to be able to create the guttural noise of Kalulu's name. But apparently Kulu is the closest human approximation. Just wanted to put that out there. The creator of the Cthulhu Mythos and the fictional underwater city of R'lyeh was convinced that life could not exist at the bottom of the ocean because the water pressure would make it uninhabitable. For humans, yes. Today we know that the darkest depths of the ocean are home to many peculiar organisms. The deepest dwelling fish we have discovered so far, the Mariana snailfish, can live about 8,000 meters, more than 26,000 feet below the ocean surface, in never-ending darkness and at hellishly crushing pressures, hundreds of times stronger than those found at sea level. Upon glancing at the modern photos of deep-sea creatures, such as the anglerfish, the fangtooth or the viperfish, and their truly Lovecraftian characteristics, it's hard not to find some irony in this. Basically living aliens on Earth. Let's continue towards this hummock. Oh!
The fourth evening,
We're getting there.
I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting it out in sharper relief from the general surface. Too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night.
It's a very, very faint rumbling happening.
But ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more.
I would love to see a sky like that again. London, don't see anything like that. Really want to take a trip to Hawaii. Apparently it's the astronomical observation capital of the world. One of, maybe. I don't know. I kind of made that up. But I know it's a place to go if you want to experience the stars.
Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again. And in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day.
Really?
Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy.
Well, I mean, I guess so, but stuff's pretty fucked up. You probably at least want, like, some light to just keep you sane.
Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence.
The eminence, gosh. I know I'm interjecting pretty frequently, but again, let me preface this by saying the guy was, as far as I'm aware, a piece of shit, but his penchant for writing, it's very nice. It's very nice. I envy it. The eminence.
I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me. But I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscences of Paradise Lost, and of Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness.
They are very impressive rock textures. I just wanted to point that out.
As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined.
So it was time to make my descent. I was wondering if the moon was moving in real time, but it doesn't look like it is. It was time for me to make my descent.
Ledges and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for a descent. Whilst after a drop of only a few hundred feet, the declivity became very gradual.
Kind of, really jumped the gun there, huh? You fool! You absolute buffoon! If only you'd thought before you
by an impulse
spoke.
Which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath.
And then noticed the obelisk in the distance.
Gazing into the Stygian deeps, where no light had yet penetrated.
Stygian deeps? Let me look up what Stygian means. Stygian deeps. Stygian deeps, Guild Wars 2. Can't help but feel like that's a reference to Dagon. Stygian. Relating to the river Styx in Greek mythology. Would you look at that? Very cool.
All at once, my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me. An object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon.
What could it possibly be?
That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself.
Until I realised that it was perfectly chiselled into the shape of a No, I'm kidding. Until I realised it was the shape of a human I couldn't bring myself to understand what I was looking at, but still I pressed on, for if this was indeed a gigantic it was more important for me to ascertain its nature than for me to consider the immense... I don't know. I couldn't continue.
But I was conscious of a distinct impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express.
That's a bit... Onto the obelisk.
Despite its enormous magnitude, and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures.
To the only conclusion you can come to at this point, my guy.
Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely.
I would assume after 5 days the horror would eventually abate, and you would be left with the sense of wonder, especially when it's all you have left. Still no secrets. I don't know how long this game is. Don't know how long this video is going to be. Ooh.
The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steeps that hemmed in the chasm.
Oh, ho, ho, look at that. Shit's worse than we thought it was.
And revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope.
As I stooped, very, very thirsty at this point, as my reserves of water had run out, I could taste that the pool of water was... Is it not a Stephen King novel where it starts raining? Or is it like Dean Koontz? Or who is it? It's like an alien. It's a book about an alien invasion, and it starts raining, and like the wife in the story is like, "Ah, yes, that is indeed." Wait, no, I want to know what this book is now. Google search. Book where it rains. The Taking. Dean Koontz. The Taking. Oh, I've just found a Reddit thread. Oh, what's this? Dean Koontz is my favourite author, but that doesn't mean he can't be guilty of not knowing how work. And then a screenshot, an excerpt from one of his books. Instead of 20 minutes, she arrived in 15. She parked in the garage and came into the kitchen through the connecting door. She was off duty, not in uniform, and when she saw the money piled on the island, her swelled instantly, enormously against her white t-shirt. She said, "What's this? Some case evidence or something?" "No, baby, this is righteous spoils." Amazed, she said, "Yours?" "Ours." It was hidden in Shackett's car. She had brought a bottle of good red wine. She set it on the island and buried her face in the money and inhaled deeply. When she looked up, she said, "You are going to get so totally humped." Carrying on. That was a tangent. I'm sorry about that.
Across the chasm, the wavelets washed the base of the Cyclopean monolith.
Cyclopean, wow.
On whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures.
Run away, dude. Human eyes were not meant to see this.
The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound.
Storytelling methods. Dagon contains many themes and storytelling methods that Lovecraft developed in his later works, such as telling the story through carvings, at the Mountains of Madness, the Nameless City, journals and characters' notes, the shadow out of time, the haunter of the dark, islands emerging from the ocean, the call of or fictional beings and deities based on real events and mythologies, Migo in the Whisper in Darkness. It's also considered the origin of the popular mythos. Some of Lovecraft's other stories also conclude in a manner similar to Dagon, but let's skip the details in order not to spoil the ending. You, keeping me enthralled, I see.
Plainly visible across the intervening water, on account of their enormous size, were an array of bas-reliefs whose subjects would have excited the envy of a Doré.
I have no idea what any of that meant. None. I have no fucking clue what he just said.
I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men.
Mermen.
Though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage at some monolithic shrine, which appeared to be under the waves as well. Of their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail.
I mean,
for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint.
Are they the faces?
Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or a Bulwer.
They are pretty freaky. Like that top one, nightmare fuel.
They were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet, shockingly wide and flabby lips.
Ugh.
Glassy, bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall.
Less pleasant than that?
Curiously enough, they seem to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background.
I kind of don't want to look at these things anymore. I feel like they're driving me crazy just looking at them.
For one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as but little larger than himself.
I feel like maybe, just maybe, they are in proportion.
I remarked, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but in a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe.
Again, it's very, very important to rationalize things in order to stop yourself from going crazy.
Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestor of the Piltdown or Neanderthal man was born.
Okay, time to move on.
All awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist. I stood musing whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it.
Saw what? What did you see? What did you see? What have you seen? What did you see? Oh. Oh, here we go, boys. Things are about to get fucked up.
With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Fiend-like and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then.
That actually made me jump.
Frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little.
Okay, let's rush, I guess. Let's go.
I believe I sang a great deal and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing.
Lovecraft had a very particular idea of what madness was like. I screamed and I laughed as I feared for my life.
I have indistinct recollections of a great storm sometime after I reached the boat.
And I just want to point out that the rain in this game is still better than it is in the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition.
At any rate, I know that I heard pearls of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital. Brought thither
Lucky
by
break.
the captain of the American ship which had picked up my boat in mid-ocean. In my delirium, I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention.
Right, so I just want to point out, please let me just point out, you were at sea for many days, sun-scorched, probably dehydrated, mad with isolation. You think you saw your boat moored in endless sludge, land that had risen from the depths of the ocean. You can't explain that, and yet you're picked up by a boat as you lay adrift in the ocean. How did your boat get back to the ocean? It didn't. You were there the whole time. Your ramblings were ignored for a reason, sir.
Of any land upheaval in the Pacific, my rescuers knew nothing. Nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe.
Very impressive environments. Like the look of the game, very, very impressive.
Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god.
Huh. I forgot I can zoom in. Completely forgot I could do that. Dagon. Dagon, was the main deity of the Philistines, worshipped throughout the Middle East as the ancient god of fertility and crops. In Hebrew, the word Dagon was a common noun for grain. The rulers of Akkad, Mesopotamia, chose him as the patron saint of their war conquests. He also appeared as the judge of the dead in an Assyrian poem and an underworld prison warder in one of the Babylonian texts. He is often mistakenly taken for a fish god due to the wrong interpretation of his name, as in Hebrew the word dag means fish. In H.P. Lovecraft's works, Dagon is an underwater deity ruling over the deep ones, a humanoid race with fish traits that resides in the oceans. He is worshipped by a secret cult called the Esoteric Order of Dagon.
But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries.
There's the Necronomicon. The Cthulhu Mythos. August Derelict was an American writer and anthologist. He also befriended Lovecraft and published many of his works through his company, Arkham House. Although he greatly contributed to the popularization of the author's works after his death, he is surrounded by numerous controversies. One of his most questionable decisions involved introducing the good versus evil doctrine, Derelict was a devout Catholic, to the Cthulhu Mythos, which contrasted with Lovecraft's view of the world and his approach to cosmic horror. As a result, the author's works are often misunderstood and misrepresented in today's culture. Really? Kulu is misunderstood? Please do tell. It is also worth noting that Lovecraft was never really interested in creating a mythology, and the term Cthulhu Mythos was coined by Derelict after the author left the mortal plane. Now that is an interesting fact. There's something about that bus that makes me feel very uncomfortable. Why did you walk me over here? Is there supposed to be some kind of secret which you're not alerting me to? I can only understand that which you allow me to understand, developer. And this I do not. It is as if I am going mad. Couldn't have just walked in that direction on, just...
It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing.
Oh, I don't want to see nothing. I don't want to see anything, thank you very much.
I tried morphine.
Oh, he tried morphine to help. Quell his, I guess, PTSD.
But the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often, I ask myself if it could not all have been a pure phantasm.
I'm sure it was.
A mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat, after my escape from the German man-of-war.
I'm almost entirely certain.
This I ask myself, but ever does there come before me a hideously vivid vision in reply.
This'll be good.
I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed. Worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likenesses on submarine obelisks of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down into their reeking talons the remnants of puny, war-exhausted mankind.
This is getting pretty deep.
Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium.
Holy shit, they're waging all-out war on New York! They're waging all-out war on Lady Liberty! I just have to stand here and let her get destroyed? Unbelievable.
The end is near.
Holy shit. Someone... What is happening? What is happening?
I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it.
This is why he jumps out the window. Oh, the door is actually... Yeah, that is happening. Sure is. At least it looks like it. I don't... Let me... Hey. I don't want... Why? Why are you making me do this, video game? Why? Also, you've got a bed there. Like, that chest isn't going to do much.
It shall not find me.
No, it shall bloody well not. Uh-oh!
God, that hand!
Yep, that hand. Yep, I can't look away. There's nothing I can do.
The window! The window!
Yep, yep. You want me to turn around? Let's go. Let's go! Oh. I guess it didn't end. Holy crap. Thank you for playing. We hope you enjoyed immersing yourself in our little pool of cosmic horror. we would appreciate it if you took a moment to rate Dagon and check out our other games and DLCs. I enjoyed it. That was good. Really, really well made. Really well made. Very well paced. I really liked it. It didn't have to be more than it was. It didn't have to be more than it was. You know, I know I was complaining saying, oh, it'd be nice if I could walk around, but it didn't have to be much more than that. You know, it was punchy, it was short, it was very, very well narrated, very well crafted. The scenery perfectly encapsulated the story. Wonderful. Really enjoyed it. That's it. Thank you very much for joining. Please like this video. Let me know what you would like me to play next. Also, leave me a comment just telling me how your day's going. My day's been going okay. Tell me about your day too. Please subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Give me suggestions on stuff that you want me to play. And my name has been Viexi, and until we meet again.